Всем привет! Это канал Андроид Broadcast и я Кирилл Розов. Мы продолжаем наш митап, посвященный Андроид 12, который организован совместно с Google Россия. Мне выдалась классная возможность пообщаться с Муратом Ене из Google, команды Core Dev адвокатов, который ответил мне много про что интересное касательно Android 12, новых изменениях, будущего его и вообще, в принципе, что такого будет у нас интересного дальше и какую роль играет Jetpack. Помимо того, у вас есть классная возможность выиграть одну книжку по Андроид. Причем не обычную книжку, а книжку от Четхаса, в которой он рассказывает, как создавался Андроид, вообще про команду и много-много чего интересного, такие своеобразные мемуары. Вроде бы книжка-то обычная, все ее можно купить, но она достаточно на самом деле уникальная, потому что в ней будет личный автограф Чета. Мы действительно попросили его подписать все книжки, пересылаем их сейчас из Штатов, они в пути, вполне возможно, пока вы смотрите это видео. И розыгрыш мы устроим через 2 недели после выхода этого видео. Поэтому, чтобы выиграть такую книжку, вам нужно сделать следующее. Быть подписанным на канал, и чтобы я мог посмотреть ваши подписки. Вам нужно оставить какой-то способ связи с вами в комментарии и, конечно же, оставить комментарий, а также поставить лайк под этим видео. Ну и наслаждайтесь ответами про Android 12. Кстати, если вы боитесь, что там будет все на английском, не переживайте. Мы специально сделали русские субтитры, которые вам позволят легче все понять. Is it possible to control material you palette? As an example, limiting colors or anything else, because it can be used based on wallpaper from main screen or any other settings, but in application we still have brand colors.
Yeah, it's definitely up to you to opt in or not. The first thing you can do is basically just apply material hue, and if the device is on light or dark theme, choose your brand colors according to light and dark themes. So basically create both themes for your app, and the system will automatically give you the palette related to your user setting. You can opt in and get the background color from the wallpaper and the device settings, but it's all up to you. So you can definitely just stay with the light and dark theme and just use your predefined themes for light and dark themes.
One of the interesting features in Android 12 is private compute core. It's new, as I understood, it's secure sandbox for some parts of operations with user data to isolate it. Am I right?
That's correct. And private compute core mostly tries to do everything on the device without exposing your data outside without your approval. But anything beyond that, to be honest, I'm not actively working on private computing, and I guess that's most I can say.
In Android 12, we got standard splash screen for all applications. Yeah, and the first question, why we need standard splash screen after 11 years of Android?
Well, for 11 years, we've been asking developers to not use splash screens, but apparently developers love it. Joke aside, we understand that apps need their own branding, and also another reason is while the app loads into memory, users want to see some progress that the app is being loaded and going to be displayed. And with the current, without any splash screen APIs, what developers needed to do was basically launch an activity to show a splash screen, which wasn't ideal because to launch an activity, your app must first loaded by the operating system and starts running in the memory before starting to show something. Again, this is not ideal because just after the gap, while the app loads into memory, you create another pause to show your splash screen. So we decided to give developers API to show a customizable splash screen, while providing a default splash screen for all apps to give the user some feeling on how the app, while the app is being loaded, and they can basically see the progress and what app is going to be launching. And with that, if you still want to keep your branding and splash screen, the new splash screen API is very customizable, so you can easily create a transition from the default splash screen to your own splash screen. Although this might not be ideal for most apps because you're basically creating again a pause before the user can start using the app. But again, it's all up to you. If you're not interested in a splash screen, it will be a very short pause, and again, this won't delay the launch of your app. Basically, the splash screen will be shown while the app is being loaded, and you're still free to show your own branding if you choose to.
Is it possible to turn off default splash screen and use your own or run application without splash screen at all?
No, as far as I know, the splash screen is automatically displayed with Android 12.
App Widgets API was updates of it was really huge, and that's great. But I didn't saw anything cool for users, new features and new ways how it's possible to interact with them, or more value of them to users. And my question is about what we will have with widgets, because right now they was dead because nothing useful was, an implementation was very hard. Implementation become simpler, but no useful feature for users.
Yes, let me reply this in two parts. So actually, this should be probably three parts. I'll get them together. So first of all, let's group the changes in two parts. The first part is mostly UI and UX related changes, which actually affects the users a lot. So there's a lot of changes regarding to how the widgets look, like the rounded corners, how you can get the dynamic colors, stuff like that, as well as tappable controls. Now you can have checkboxes, radio boxes. Basically, users can do much more without launching the app, and they can basically interact with the widget without needing to go into the app. I think this is a very a good gain for the users, because with this change, the widgets become more useful and more capable. And the nice part is that actually it doesn't change the fact that the widgets are not stateful. They are still stateless. And the backing activity basically keeps all the state and update the widget as needed. The second part is, yes, it's mostly for developers to help developers to develop widgets easier. That was a problem because widgets APIs have been in Android for forever, since from the beginning, which also means they needed some updates. So the API updates were mostly targeting those old APIs to be updated and being used more easily. Besides those, there is a third update which we are still working on. And this is super exciting for me because now there will be a new, easier way to develop widgets with Jetpack Compose. The new APIs will make it much, much easier. And with that, the nice thing is it will also create a easy entry point for Jetpack Compose, because if you compare a widget to an activity, usually widgets are much simpler, so you don't need to create a more complex UI. So it will be a very easy way to start building something with Compose while rest of your app is still in the legacy or the standard Android UI. So to sum up, yes, there are actually really nice changes for users, both visually and functional, by adding new functionalities such as tappable controls. But I agree, most of the changes are for developers so that they can build more capable and more functional widgets easier.
I remember how was introduced Slices API, Jetpack Slices. Yes, and I thought that this will be replacement of widget independent of Android SDK distributed via Jetpack library. Yeah, and what will be with it?
I am not actively working on slices, so not exactly sure about that part.
The next cool API in Android 12 is performance classes. Because it allows us to separate devices on buckets based on their performance. Will we have some kind of Jetpack API like performance classes to separate devices before Android 12?
I know we have performance classes for 11 will be published, which is basically a subset of performance class 12. But anything older, I am not sure.
Official guides more often recommend use Jetpack APIs instead of APIs in Android SDK. And we have trend to replace Android SDK with Jetpack libraries or third-party libraries. Is it trend right now and in future, and we not need to study Android SDK and start from Jetpack libraries?
I mean, I can't definitely talk for unforeseeable future, but in general, yes. The reason we started with Jetpack was unbundling APIs from the operating system so that devices who are lacking the new OS versions can still use the APIs. And to be honest, Jetpack has been really successful with that. If you look at Work Manager or other Jetpack APIs, we can now support devices back to API level 14 or more recent or sometimes older, and provide consistent APIs across devices so that developers can develop apps without really needing to test it on all devices. And this trend is continuing with Android 12 and the new Jetpack libraries. However, to talk about an unforeseeable future would be probably too risky. But yeah, where currently this trend is going on, and we strongly suggest using Jetpack libraries.
For a few years of releases of Android, we have more and more limitations in how we can execute background tasks. And work manager become more complex and less easy to use, and we have more and more flags how to run a job inside it. And is it possible to stop trend? Because every year we know that we can make less as developers and feel more like in iOS.
That's a great question, and we really hear developers and we try to address their concerns. Yet, Work Manager is a really important and strong library which gives Android really unique features, which can run tasks in the background um, uh, and Work Manager can really support really up to really old APIs. We had to make some changes on Work Manager on Android with the recent release to support some changes on Foreground Services. Now we have expedited jobs to fill that gap. But yeah, other than that, every time we do a change to a library, we really try to have a strong reason, and we try to release it really early to get developer feedback. Um, if you follow any new release and come up with any issues with the changes, please let us know. If you look back on Android 11 and 10, we did a lot of step backs on file APIs. For example, when developers had difficulties to adapt to new APIs. So if you see any issues or come across any issues while trying to adapt to changes, let us know. We'll do our best to limit the changes or maybe scale them down. But most of the changes are done because either we need to support another change, a lack of functionality result of another change, such as foregrounds, limiting the foreground services. Yes, let us know if you have any issues, and we'll do our best to reschedule the timelines on the changes or give you some other options as much as we can.
We right now we have a very little number of scenarios for what we can use for ground service and when we can launch them. And I think we do not have good ways to obviously work in any way and have regulation from Google Play side about what we can do in foreground services. What right now is possible to do in foreground services and not covered by work manager?
So actually, I think the best answer to this is foreground services is really misunderstood. Foreground services, as the name suggests, basically gives a way to app to multitask while it's in the foreground. Let's consider you are using navigation to go somewhere, and at the same time you had a phone call. So you have two active apps and you're multitasking between them. Maybe you need to switch to navigation and back to the phone call. So both apps you can use foreground services to display their notification, and with that notification, users can change from one app to other easily. However, when we look at the Play Store, what we see is foreground services are used usually from background apps, the apps running in the background, which is not the foreground services are intended for. And if apps continue to use foreground services with that approach, if we don't limit them, this hits back the device with battery consumption and other issues, because basically the OS is giving a lot of resources to a background app where it shouldn't be giving that. With that change, we are basically trying to focus foreground services for what they're initially intended for. So if your use case falls into scenarios which we provided, this means that's a proper use case to foreground services, and it will also respect the user's device, and it will keep the battery and other resources in a much, it will use the resources in a much reasonable way. If you have other use cases, you can use Work Manager with expedited jobs. And with expedited jobs, we again give apps different pull options. If you have a high prioritized app, which means the user actively uses your app frequently, you will have a higher chance that the expedited job you set will be run, and the user will get result expected from your app. On the other hand, if you have an app which is not used by the user, so not really, the user doesn't really need the functionality which you offer with the foreground service or the expedited job, then the operating system will limit that job so that we will respect the user's choice, and we will give them a better life, and respect their choice. So if you're using foreground services and don't fall into the categories which the foreground services are intended for, please take a look at the expedited jobs and try to migrate to Work Manager APIs.